Hello and welcome. I hope you've had a good week. I'm trying this stream again this morning after a technical error, which was essentially me. Um, so I hope that not only have you had a good week, that you're looking forward to a good weekend, and you're not getting too upset by what you're seeing around you. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to talk about some of the things that might upset you, but with good reason, with good cause. I think it's important to recognize that we seem to be in some kind of web of, well, misinformation, disinformation, spin, perhaps that's being charitable. And I wanted to highlight a few things that have been going on, in particular connected to the government. First, let's begin with Angela Rayner. She wrote a memo. The memo was leaked. The memo said, effectively, wouldn't it be a better idea to tax people who may have the money and funnel that, siphon that somewhere where it's needed, rather than hack away at welfare? Now, I don't know what the details were going to be of that, but I'd have to say, until I see the fine print, I'm not going to dismiss it, because it seems to be a bit more Labour-esque than what has been going on with Labour, so-called Labour, so far. In essence, they seem to have a penchant for, well, just kind of going for those people who can't really defend themselves too well. Could it be, however, that this is a portent for things to come, that in actual fact that memo, well, maybe Angela is not that worried about the fact that the memo was leaked. And maybe what we're seeing is a little bit of vicious infighting behind the scenes. And it would be very interesting. It would be very interesting indeed if there was a leadership contest in terms of the Labour Party. What else has been happening? Well, in terms of the NHS and getting appointments up there, it would seem that what we've been told isn't quite right. So Labour have been saying, look at what we've done, it's amazing. And, well, some people who know a little bit about that area and can look at the figures and analyse them suggest that, no, what Labour have done is produce a snapshot, and it's not really looked at the trend. And indeed, it would seem that the increase is less than 3%. And when you look at Rishi Sunak's last year, it was a 10% increase. The year before that was 8%. So what we're seeing is actually a reduction. Yes, a reduction. And that's not what we're being told. And you could argue they're all at it, they all do it, but once more, this is against a backdrop of we're the party who's going to do the right thing. Well, I think doing the right thing is being upfront with everyone. So that's a little bit irksome. What else has been going on? Well, it now seems that the figure at the moment regarding children who've been, well, essentially taken out of schools, that's what's happened, that figure's 13,000. 13,000 so far, children displaced from their education, their schools, their friends. Private schools, independent, public, whatever you want to call them, academies. And the idea being that this will provide, I think the figure's 6,500 teachers, I believe, and to bolster up a flagging state system. Now, up front, I've never been, I'm not the product of a private, independent, public school at all. In fact, I believe that the state schools, which are flagging, really need to be raised up. They need to be raised up to the level of the best private, independent, public schools. That would be what I would hope for, because education is so important. Indeed, in terms of universities, every university should be at the level of an Oxford, a Cambridge, and so on. However, what I would say is that there seems to be a bit of a sort of cruel streak in this move, a bit of viciousness, because what is being saved or siphoned out of independent schools, well, is 6,500 enough? Will that really help change that much? Some people suggest no. Folks in further education say, well, there's still a pretty substantial shortfall in terms of the teachers that they need to essentially implement and support T levels, equivalent to 3 A levels, apparently. And that being the case, what has happened is 13,000 children and counting their lives have been turned upside down. And that worries me, because I think it's okay. I think you can still be left-leaning and look at people who have money and say, that's okay, that's aspirational. There's nothing wrong with having money. There's nothing wrong with making profit, because you can do a lot with profit. You can put it to very good use. And what really gets to me is that within that 13,000, that's children, and therefore presumably thousands and thousands of families, there will be a good number of people who have scrimped and saved and worked 2-3 jobs, given up things to get the children to those schools. And why have they done that? Because the state schools are flagging. So those people are aspirational. You could call them entrepreneurial. They're probably adding a lot to the economy. And yes, in the mix, of course, there'll be people who are like filthy rich, and some of those people will be obnoxious. But there are other people who are not rich, and they can be obnoxious. So I just wonder whether this is a prejudice and almost like a chip in the shoulder to say, oh, well, you're toffs. We don't like you. Let's pull that money out. And I think about the children. I think about the experience that they must be going through. They must be having right now. It's awful. It's not a good look. And will it really make a difference to state schools? Because there's an awful lot that needs to be done. And I think that what we should be doing is finding money that may be going out and ploughing it back into this country. I'm not alone with that. So, but a potential vicious infighting in terms of Angela and in terms of Bridget Phillipson. Well, I think a streak potentially of viciousness there. She probably would deny that and say, no, it's going to make a difference. I hope it does. But I think those children, I mean, the people that can afford it, well, they couldn't really afford it. Their kids are still in the schools. So not exactly nuanced thinking. Then we have this whole thing about Chagos, the islands. And so it looks like, I mean, what Keir Starmer is saying is that, well, unless he did this, then China or something was going to happen. And the International Court of Justice, I believe it is, apparently has no teeth, so they could have been ignored. The story that we're being told is, oh no, we'd run out of runway. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's true. But Keir is coming in for a lot of attack because of what he's done. Viciousness there. Why is that? Because maybe he's right. Maybe what he's done has been the right thing. Maybe what he has signed is indeed something that will really protect us. And it had to be done. But other people disagree and say Mauritius essentially, and again, I have nothing against Mauritius, lovely place, Mauritius has no real claim. And this total over the years is, well, depends on whose figures you look at, because the governments are lower. I've heard like, a handful of billion, 10 billion, 30 billion, but it's a lot. And one of the reasons, I think, again, that Keir is coming in for attack is because there is that sense of money going out, and people are they're reacting emotionally, they are emotional at that. And you can see why. Winter fuel payments, potential U-turn, kids being ripped out of schools. Why is that? Why are we struggling for money? There are many reasons for that. The answer to that is, again, to be fair to anyone in government, it's multifactorial. Of course it is. But at the same time, we have to look at what this government is doing and where and how they seem to be targeting certain individuals. And then let's do two more. Then we have the recent news about Lucy Connolly, her appeal failed, and I do worry about that lady. I do worry about that family, and of course, you may not know, but you probably know what she did was posted something on social media, and then thought about it and regretted it and deleted it. And she shouldn't have done that, but we now have a backstory, just like they do in the movies, and she lost a child some years ago. And when she heard about the killings in Southport, she was understandably upset at the thought of what had happened. And so she wrote some stuff and posted it in anger, in the heat of the moment. And yet, having served quite a lot of time in jail, her appeal has been denied. Why is that? I cannot think that she's a danger to society. Isn't it meant to be the case that if people show remorse, then they're on the road to recovery? They're deemed to be safe to be let out. Isn't she one of the safest people around? Is she likely to do anything odd, dangerous? I would say not. And also, she has a reason for having acted the way that she acted. I don't condone it, but we've all done things in the heat of the moment. And if the legal system is about remorse and being self-aware and changing, she did that in real time. And so you got to wonder what is going on there, because there are people wandering around. In fact, there's been people let out of prisons, with much of the sentence not served, and maybe some of them shouldn't have been. Some of them reoffended, of course, but Lucy Connolly, no. Is she? I mean, I'm just speculating, of course. Is she just some kind of example that we should look at? Don't know. And so that I consider that to be, and I'm sure, yes, great legal minds will say, no, that has to happen. But to me, there's a streak of cruelty and viciousness there as well. Then we have the odd, strange arson attacks on Keir Starmer's property to do with rent, I think it was. Like, I mean, of course, he was renting the property. That's what I mean by that. And very peculiar. A couple of the perpetrators are Ukrainian, I think, and young models, at least one of them, two of them, is it? Very, very peculiar. What is going on there? And I think the press got briefed by an arm of the government who said, well, they're looking at Russian interference. Why? I mean, sure, yeah. Who knows? Wheels are in wheels, and I've always said that the truth will be stranger than the fiction in many of these cases. But still, is that just something the government's put out to go? Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. But maybe it is. But again, why? What do they want to do? Just look at the UK government and say we need to destabilise them because they're really on top of things. They're building a powerful, cohesive society and culture and a powerhouse of a country. Are they? Well, yeah, maybe. I don't see that yet. So that's just odd. And then to finish off, talking about these couple of people being Ukrainian, there is a proposal that we should introduce a GCSE for the Ukrainian children who've been displaced. And I'm totally all for that. I think that is such a really good idea, because goodness knows what some of them have gone through, and it is important to protect the vulnerable. It is important to look after them. It is important to recognise that pain and suffering, and if we possibly can, do whatever we can to make their lives better. So I'm totally all for that, and I think that would be a good thing, and it shows a kind and considerate and empathic side to those people in government, and they are there. But here's the thing, where's the kind and compassionate side to the 13,000 children, many of whom I strongly suspect, whose parents are devastated and ploughed everything in that they could? So this whole them and us, if it's the rich, I don't think is very becoming of Labour. And that doesn't mean to say that I don't think people who earn certain amounts shouldn't be taxed, and that we shouldn't focus on welfare and target that, and we shouldn't focus on pensioners, because no, I think that we shouldn't. Absolutely. And so you got to wonder, with all this spin and counterspin, who can you trust? And is Keir really on top of things? His popularity has plummeted, and the deal with Mauritius is just a little bit odd, but maybe he's right, and the whole arson thing is peculiar, and I do worry when I read things like I have read about Lucy Connolly's appeal, and then we'll come right back to Angela. Wonder what's going on there. That's very interesting. Anyway, I better let you get on with your day. What do you think about all of that? For the moment, from me, hope you have a good day. Bye for now.